Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! It was a somewhat windy Monday when all of this happened. I was on my way home from work that day after taking a slight detour to the nearest Walmart to do some quick shopping. I picked up what I came here for, then headed for the checkout line. And that's when I started hearing some ruckus coming from the back of the store. It was some female shrieking that could easily be identified by many shoppers around this area. It's a no-brainer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a Karen in the building. I tried to hear what was going on exactly, but I failed as it was somewhat farther in the back. But when I was about to leave with my groceries, I saw a woman dragging her cart, and some poor employee was her near the checkout area, where she found herself a suited-up manager and started complaining a bit about some other customer taking the last item on the shelf before she did, and that she wants her item back, plus a customer fired and banned from the store. At that moment, I realized that she was a level 10 Karen, and I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible before things got uglier. Because normally, that's how it works, and that's how it ends. After I was done with my shopping, I headed into the parking lot, and there, I really struggled to get into my car simply because some idiot was parking his car right next to mine without leaving much room for me to open my car door to get in. Even though there are many vacant spaces around the lot, you didn't really have to do that to me. Anyways, not wanting to annoy the hell out of myself or waste so much time trying to search or wait for this other car's owner to come and move his car a bit, I managed to squeeze myself in and started driving home. As I said earlier, it was getting a little bit more windy for my liking, but at least I didn't have any appointments later that night, and thankfully I could stay inside for the remainder of my day. As I was nearing my neighborhood, I started seeing huge pillars of black smoke rising in the sky. I got extremely worried as I practically live at the end of this street I'm currently driving towards, and it clearly looks like there is a nasty fire somewhere near my house. My heart dropped, and it proceeded to beat very fast as I started to overthink horrible stuff since I'm leaving my beloved wife and our newborn baby in our house. But shortly after, I couldn't help but let out a massive sigh of relief, as it was clear to me now that it was not my house on fire. I quickly called my wife to check on her and made sure she and our baby were safe. Then I decided to park my car in a side street nearby and headed for where the smoke was coming from. A quick note, my parents died in a car accident when I was very young, and I was raised by my uncle and aunt. They were the best people, and they did their best to raise me properly. One of the things they taught me and made sure I embraced from a young age is to help others whenever I had the chance, even if they were not related to me, even if I didn't even know them. Rule was, if you can help someone out, then stick around and do it without expecting anything in return. Hence, why I headed towards the area where the fire was. I don't know what I could help with, I have no idea if the firefighters were there yet or not, but all I know is that I'll try to help out with whatever I can, but of course, without being a burden on the professionals doing their job. Thankfully, when I reached my destination, I found the fire trucks, ambulances, and the police cars filling the street. Everyone was occupied and trying to do their best to get this fire to die down. From asking bystanders, I knew that at the moment the house was empty, and that thankfully no one was injured or still stuck inside the house on fire. As I mentioned earlier, it was getting annoyingly windy, and we were just standing there hoping for the firefighters to be able to contain the fire before it spread to the nearby houses and made a bad situation a lot worse. After some time and right when things started feeling like going in the right way, I hear some loud tire screeching. Look over and lay my eyes on an oddly familiar car. I try to remember where I saw this car before, but before I realized it was the same car that parked right next to mine in a Walmart parking lot, a familiar angry face gets out of it and starts moving towards the fire trucks. It was Karen, the one from before at Walmart. A cop stops her and asks her to stay away for the time being until the situation settles and the fire is contained. But she starts shouting back at him to move these fire trucks from where they are, all so she could park her car in front of her house, the house next to the burning one, and quickly stuck the ice cream she bought into her freezer before it melts down, especially with all this heat around. I couldn't see the cop's face from where I was standing, but I'm sure his jaw dropped just like mine did at how self-centered this woman is. The house next to yours is on fire and you're pestering the cops about how the heat from the fire is going to melt your ice cream and also get rid of the fire trucks so you could park your car where you usually do? Are you for real, woman? The cop tries to calm her down, but to no avail, especially after he explains to her that they can't do that right now and that she's going to have to wait. After screaming and shouting more and more about her house, the ice cream and parking space, eventually she just huffs and stomps right back to her car like a little child throwing a tantrum. And at the moment I thought she accepted the fact that there is no going into her house right now or even parking her car near it. She gets inside her car, turns the engine back on, and presses the gas pedal as hard as she can, holding her car into the stay-away zone and crashing into the nearest fire truck, while barely missing the police officer that told her off after he managed to jump out of her way when he saw her car moving. After that, it was just a fiasco. Cops and EMTs were running towards her car, getting her out and placing her hands behind her back and cuffing them while she kept screaming some nonsense about ice cream and getting them all fired and fined for parking in her parking space. Thankfully, the firefighters near the fire truck that she crashed into weren't harmed. However, I saw the EMT standing to the cop that jumped out of the way before getting run over. Clearly, he injured his elbow or arm, but I'm not entirely sure if she hit his arm with her car or he just injured it when he landed on the ground. After another hour, the firefighters managed to contain the fire and eventually it died down entirely. Later, I learned that this crazy Karen was facing some serious list of charges that was topped with assault and battery on a police officer. The last I heard, she was hit with 5 years in prison, but I'm not quite sure if it stopped there, to be honest, as I dropped following her case since I got busier later on. I don't know really what was going on inside her crazy head doing what she did, but overall, I'm glad she got what she deserved. Someone that mental is better off being locked inside a prison cell and away from people. Entirely too many years ago, I started to work at a fast food company, let's call it Southern State Not-Baked Poultry. Southern State Not-Baked Poultry wasn't a bad first job. I was 16 and the assistant manager at the location was my best friend's stepdad, so we took what was tedious and menial and tried to make it fun. He was actually a really good manager and genuinely cared about the people who worked for him. We would do silly stuff before the store opened while we were doing prep. He would have music playing loudly from his office. As long as everything got done and done well, he really didn't care if we had fun doing it. We will call him Larry. This story is not about him though. This story is about our store manager. We will call him Tim. Tim was the exact opposite of our assistant manager. Everything had to be taken seriously. Fun was outlawed. I genuinely hated working with Tim. Tim was egocentric, power-hungry, petty little man with delusions of grandeur because he was a manager of Southern State Not-Baked Poultry. Tim's approach to managing was to work the employee until they burned out. When they did, fire them and hire someone else. Needless to say, morale when Tim worked was in the garbage. Tim hated that crews would prefer working with Larry instead of him. He hated that crews had fun when Larry was working. He hated that our store's number were always better when Larry worked. Mostly, he just hated everyone. But one thing that he absolutely hated was a silly little thing Larry did. If it was before the restaurant opened, he would stick his tongue between his teeth and lower lip and shout out, "Hi," followed by the name of whichever employee had just walked in. It sounded absolutely ridiculous. I would always do the same thing back, which ended up sounding something like, "Hi, Wowie." A perfect example of what a jerk Tim was is this. There was a young woman who, due to a variety of stressors, attempted to commit suicide after a particularly grueling shift working with Tim. After she had recovered, she came back for her last paycheck, and Larry was working. Not a coincidence, she called the store to find out what day he was working. So Larry sat her down in the lobby, bought her lunch, brought her last check out, and sat and talked with her for about an hour. It was after the lunch rush, and he had the time, so he made sure she was doing okay now, and talked about whatever she wanted to talk about. By the time she left, she was smiling but had tears on her cheeks. She had never had someone just sit and listen, and let her talk out everything that was going on. Well, the next day Tim had come in and hauled Larry into the office. His words, and I can quote them exactly because the office was a tiny little cube with no ceiling, just a place to stash paperwork and a computer were. The next time the suicide queen comes in, tell her to do it right next time. So now you have a clear picture of exactly how petty and vindictive this little man was. Here is where the revenge starts. We were scheduled to have the regional and national bigwigs for southern states not baked poultry come through our area for an annual inspection. Tim had his eyes set on being one of those bigwigs, at least for the region. Why wouldn't he be? He did everything by the book. That automatically made him a good manager, at least in his eyes. Everything had a checklist and a procedure, and a set of written instructions in a book. And if you couldn't meet the expectations set forth in the book, well, Tim would yell at you and berate you. Because that's how a manager manages, you see. Well, before the bigwigs got to our store, we knew what day they would be coming. Several of us had agreed that, on that day, they come through, we would all screw up just enough to get Tim to blow his cool. Because our regional manager and the national bigwigs all believed that Southern State Not Baked Poultry was a family company, and that employees were valuable team members. The day in question arrived and the bigwigs were there for their big tour. Whoops, one of the fryers hadn't had the oil replaced last night. Oh, look, the shaker table hadn't been cleaned. Darn it, we've got way too much coleslaw made of pan. We won't get through it before we had to toss it. Crap. We don't have enough chicken poultry in the cooker to fulfill the lunch rush. Man, someone forgot to preheat the second cooker. You get the picture. After the second time, I took a minute too long to get a basket of chicken poultry into the cooker. Tim absolutely lost his crap, yelling, cursing, and throwing things. He actually physically pushed me away from the preheating station in the middle of the lunch rush, while the regional manager and several bigwigs from National stood there, while we had aligned several people deep at booth cash registers, and the lobby full of people eating. Tim stood there, gulping like a fish. His mouth was moving like he was trying to say something, but no sounds were coming out. The room was absolutely quiet other than the beeping of a fryer that was done. I looked at Tim, and this was the moment we had all been gearing up for. I looked down at where he had pushed me, a set of handprints in flour on my chest, and I cut loose into him, yelled at him that I quit, took off my apron and threw it at him. Told him I was tired of his abuse, of his poor management, of how he single-handedly drove morale through the floor every time he walked through the doors, how he was a crappy excuse for a manager, and that if he didn't have Larry and a couple of good shift leads, he'd have driven the location out of business a long time ago. All the color drained from his face, and he bolted to the office cube. The national and regional folks ended up comping everyone's meal that were in a restaurant. Interestingly enough, Tim was not fired, but he was demoted to an assistant manager, and Larry was promoted to a manager. About 10 years later, I was working at my current job as an EMT. We had just dropped a patient off at the hospital that was across the street from the same restaurant. And my partner was so hungry, so we drove across the street and pulled in. Now, I hadn't set foot in that restaurant since the day I had quit, but lo and behold, who is working at the counter but Tim himself? And his name tag still shows assistant manager. The restaurant was empty since it was between lunch and dinner time, and I just couldn't help myself. I stuck my tongue between my teeth and lower lip, and as loud as I could, shouted out, "Hi, Twim." Haven't been back there since, but that was around 12 years ago. I'm willing to bet he's still just the assistant manager there. Sarah, was walking through the grocery store in a busy afternoon running some errands. I was walking down one of the aisles when I heard a commotion up ahead. As I got closer, I saw a disabled person in a wheelchair who appeared to be apologizing to a woman who was clearly angry. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the disabled person said. "I didn't mean to bump into your shopping cart." However, the woman, Karen, was not in a forgiving mood. She started yelling and pointing her finger in a disabled person's face. "Do you have any idea how much these groceries cost? You're going to pay for this, you careless little brat." I was shocked and disturbed by Karen's behavior. I felt that I had to intervene and try to de-escalate the situation. I stepped forward and addressed Karen. "You need to stop this right now. There is no need to talk to this person like that." Karen turned to me, surprised that someone had the audacity to confront her. "Excuse me? Who do you think you are? I'm someone who believes in treating others with kindness and respect, and you are not doing either of those things right now." Karen didn't like being told what to do. She started to lunge at me, but I was ready for her. I stepped to the side and decked her down with one swift punch. Karen hit the ground, stunned and dazed. The commotion had attracted the attention of other shoppers and the store manager, who called the police. When the police arrived, they took Karen into custody and asked for my statement. I explained what had happened and why I felt I had to intervene. The disabled person thanked me for coming to the rescue and expressed gratitude for my kindness and compassion. "Thank you so much. I don't know what would have happened if you weren't here." The incident made headlines in the local news and sparked a conversation about the importance of treating others with dignity and respect, regardless of their abilities or disabilities. People were shocked and appalled by Karen's behavior and expressed their support for me and the disabled person. I was somehow hailed as a hero for my actions in my inner circle, and my story was shared far and wide as an example of standing up for what is right. The outpouring of support from my community was overwhelming and humbling. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.